My name is Margaret, but most people just call me Grandma Maggie. I am 75 years old, with gray hair that I like to comb neatly every morning, and a pair of glasses that rest on the tip of my nose. Now, before I dive into my story, let me ask you, dear listener, where are you watching from tonight? Are you curled up in your bed, maybe sitting on the porch, or perhaps listening in your car? Wherever you are, I want you to hold on tight, because what I am about to tell you is a story you won't forget in a hurry. This story is about my trip to Tampa, Florida, to visit an old school friend of mine. Her name is Linda Johnson. We had been friends since we were 15, but life has a funny way of pulling people apart. She moved to Tampa after marriage, and I stayed in Georgia with my own family. We wrote letters for many years, then came the days of telephones, then later cell phones and video calls. But no matter how much technology tried to bring us close, nothing could replace sitting across from each other, drinking coffee, and laughing about the old times. Now, the title of my story is very clear. My trip to Tampa, Florida to visit an old school friend and miss the address. And let me tell you, that is exactly what happened. But it wasn't just a simple case of "Hey lady, you lost or something." The man's voice cut through the heavy air like a sharp knife. My knees nearly buckled, but I told myself, Maggie, stand tall. Don't let them smell fear. At 75, my body may not be as strong as it once was, but my spirit was still firm. I turned slowly, forcing a polite smile onto my face. "Yes, sir," I answered, my voice trembling just a little. "I'm looking for my friend's house on Maplewood Drive. Maybe I took the wrong turn." The man chuckled, and the others joined in. Their laughter wasn't kind. It was the type that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. He stepped closer, and I could smell the sharp scent of smoke on his clothes. "Well, this is Maplewood, but I don't think you're in the part you're supposed to be." My heart thumped hard against my chest. I glanced around, praying for someone else, anyone, to appear. And just like a gift from heaven, a woman opened her front door across the street. She looked about my age, maybe younger, and she had a baby on her hip. I hurried toward her as fast as my legs could carry me, calling out, "Excuse me, ma'am. Can you help me, please?" The men laughed again, but this time they didn't follow. Thank the Lord. The woman stepped onto her porch, her eyes cautious but kind. "What's wrong, dear?" she asked. I explained my situation, showing her the paper with Linda's address. She studied it carefully, then shook her head. "Honey, you're on North Maplewood. Your friend's house is on South Maplewood. That's about 4 miles from here." My mouth dropped open. 4 miles. No wonder the house didn't look right. My cheeks burned with embarrassment, but the woman gave me a gentle smile. "Don't worry. Happens more than you think. These streets can be confusing." I felt tears prick my eyes, partly from relief and partly from exhaustion. "Thank you so much," I whispered. The woman's name was Angela, and she invited me inside for a glass of water while I figured out how to get to South Maplewood. Her home was small but neat, with a clean rug and pictures of her children on the wall. She handed me a cold glass, and as I drank, I felt my strength return. "You remind me of my mama," she said softly. "She's in her 70s too. I'd want someone to help her if she was lost." That touched my heart deeply. You see, kindness is like— The car jolted to a halt, rocking slightly before going still. My hands were shaking so badly I had to press them against my knees just to steady them. The loud pop still echoed in my ears, and the smell of burnt rubber drifted through the cracked window. "Lord have mercy," I muttered under my breath. The driver— his name was Mr. Howard, I later learned— took off his cap and wiped his forehead. "I'm so sorry about this, ma'am. That tire's gone clean out. We'll need to replace it before we can go anywhere." I tried to calm myself down, but I couldn't help thinking about Linda waiting for me, probably glancing at the clock and wondering where her old friend had gone. After 30 years, the last thing I wanted was to show up late, dusty and rattled. "Is it safe here?" I asked, peering out the window. We were parked on the edge of a quiet road, lined with a few old shops and houses that looked like they'd seen better days. A stray dog trotted across the street, nose to the ground, and a couple of teenagers leaned against a wall nearby, watching us. "It's not the best neighborhood," Mr. Howard admitted. "But don't you worry. I've changed more tires than I can count. Give me 10 minutes. He climbed out of the cab and I was left sitting inside, the Florida sun beating down through the glass. Sweat prickled my forehead, and I fanned myself with an old church program I'd tucked in my purse weeks ago. I tried to distract myself by thinking about the past. How Linda and I used to skip rope after school, how we wrote silly notes during class, how she once told me, "Maggie, when we're old ladies, we'll sit on a porch and laugh about all this." The thought made me smile, even in that tense moment. But then I noticed the teenagers crossing the street toward the car. My heart skipped. They were young, no older than 17, but their expressions weren't exactly friendly. One of them smirked and tapped on the passenger side window. "Hey, Grandma," he said, his voice dripping with mischief. "You stuck." Froze. Do I answer? Do I ignore him? My mama always told me not everyone who smiles at you has good intentions. Before I could decide, the other boy chimed in. "Got any cash? We can help." He winked, and I felt a chill run down my spine. Mr. Howard, bent over by the tire, glanced up. "Leave the lady alone," he called firmly. "Go on now." The boys laughed and walked off slowly, muttering things I couldn't hear. But they didn't go far, they stayed by the corner, watching. My throat tightened. Finally, after what felt like forever, Mr. Howard slammed the trunk shut and wiped his hands on a rag. "All set, ma'am. Sorry for the scare." Relief washed over me like cool water. "Thank you," I said, clutching my purse tightly as he held the door for me. We drove off, and I thought the worst was behind us. The sun had dipped lower in the sky, painting everything golden. My heart began to settle again. Soon, I told myself. Soon I would be at Linda's doorstep, and we'd hug, laugh, and forget all about this little misadventure. But just as we turned onto a larger road, traffic slowed to a crawl. Horns blared, people shouted, and I leaned forward to see what was happening. Up ahead, red and blue lights flashed, police cars blocking the way. "What on earth?" I whispered. Mr. Howard frowned. "Looks like there's been an accident. Might be a while before they let us through." My chest tightened again. Stuck in traffic, in a strange city, the sky growing darker by the minute. I glanced at my watch. It was nearly 7 p.m. Linda must be worried sick. But then, just as I tried to calm myself, something caught my eye. A police officer was moving car to car, speaking with drivers. When he reached ours, his face looked stern. "Evening," he said, shining a flashlight briefly inside. "We're conducting an investigation." Mind pulling over to the side. "We'll need to ask a few questions." My heart sank. Investigation. Questions. I gripped my purse tighter, my mind racing with fear. And that, dear listener, is where this chapter must end. The beam of the officer's flashlight bounced off my glasses, making me squint. I could feel the sweat sliding down my back, though the evening air had begun to cool. Mr. Howard rolled down his window slowly. "Good evening, officer," he said with as much calm as he could manage. The officer leaned in, his hand resting on the edge of the car. His badge read Officer Daniels. He was tall, with a serious look that didn't soften easily. "We're investigating a hit-and-run that happened not far from here. The suspect's vehicle is a yellow sedan, about the same age as yours. We'll need to see your license and registration." My heart thumped. A hit-and-run. My mind ran wild with thoughts. What if they think we're involved? What if they take Mr. Howard away? What will happen to me then, stranded in Tampa with no one around? Mr. Howard handed over his documents without hesitation. "This is just my cab, sir. Been driving passengers all day. This lady here, she's just trying to visit a friend." He nodded toward me. The officer's flashlight shifted to my face. For a moment I felt like a child again, caught sneaking cookies from the jar. "Ma'am, do you mind telling me where you're headed?" I swallowed hard. "Yes, sir. I'm on my way to see my old school friend. Her name's Linda Johnson." She lives on South Maplewood Drive. The officer studied me for a long second before finally nodding. All right. We just need to check the plates, then you'll be on your way. He stepped back, talking into his radio. I exhaled slowly, my hands trembling against my lap. Mr. Howard glanced at me and whispered, "Don't worry, ma'am. They're just doing their job." And he was right. Sometimes when fear grips us, we forget that not every situation is meant to harm us. Some people are out there to protect, even if their ways feel heavy at first. After a few tense minutes, the officer returned. "You're clear. Sorry for the inconvenience. Just be careful, traffic's heavy, and tempers are hotter than the weather tonight." Relief washed over me so strongly I almost cried. "Thank you, officer," I said softly. We drove on, the road finally opening up. The city lights of Tampa began to twinkle against the darkening sky, and I thought, at last, I'm getting closer. But the day had worn me down. My stomach growled, reminding me I hadn't eaten since the crackers I nibbled on the bus. Mr. Howard noticed. "Ma'am, there's a little diner up ahead. Want me to stop so you can grab something before we continue?" I hesitated. My heart wanted to get to Linda's house as fast as possible, but my body begged for food and rest. "All right," I said at last. A quick stop. The diner was small but warm, with red booths and a jukebox playing softly in the corner. The waitress, a cheerful young woman named Sarah, greeted me like I was family. "Sweetheart, you look like you've had a long day. How about some fried chicken and mashed potatoes?" I smiled for the first time in hours. That sounds heavenly. As I ate, I thought about all the little kindnesses that had carried me through the day. Angela opening her door, Mr. Howard fixing the tire, the officer letting us go. Life, I realized, is like a patchwork quilt. Some patches are dark and heavy, but others shine with light and warmth. Together they make the story of who we are. After dinner we got back on the road. The clock ticked past 9 p.m., and I clutched Linda's address tighter, rehearsing what I would say when I finally saw her. "Surprise, old friend. 30 years gone, but I never forgot you." The cab turned onto South Maplewood at last. My heart leaped. I recognized the street from the pictures Linda had once sent me. Neat houses with flower beds, porch lights glowing softly. This was it. This was home. We pulled up to a house numbered 1427. My chest tightened with joy. The lawn was trimmed, a rocking chair sat on the porch, and light glowed warmly through the curtains. I grabbed my suitcase, nearly trembling with excitement. "Thank you, Mr. Howard," I said. "You've been a blessing tonight." He tipped his cap and drove off. I turned toward the house, my heart pounding in my ears. I climbed the steps, lifted my hand, and knocked on the door. Moments later, the door creaked open. And instead of Linda, a man I'd never seen before stood in the doorway, staring at me with cold, suspicious eyes. The man at the door was tall, with a shadow of a beard and eyes that looked like they could cut glass. He leaned against the frame, folding his arms. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice deep and stern. For a moment I couldn't speak. My mouth felt dry, and my suitcase suddenly seemed too heavy in my hand. I'm looking for Linda Johnson," I stammered. "This is 1427 South Maplewood, isn't it?" His brow furrowed. "Yes, it is. But there's no Linda here. I've lived in this house for 15 years. My heart dropped. I looked again at the address written on the slip of paper, blinking hard as if maybe I had misread it. But no, it was clear as day. 1427 South Maplewood Drive. "I must have the wrong address," I whispered, my voice trembling. The man sighed, glancing past me as though checking the street. "Ma'am, this isn't the safest time to be wandering around. Do you have someone you can call?" I explained about my old school friend, how I hadn't seen her in 30 years and had traveled all the way from Georgia to visit. His expression softened just slightly. "I see. Well, Linda Johnson doesn't live here. Maybe you've got a number for her." I reached into my purse, my fingers shaking as I pulled out my phone. The battery had given up long ago. The man hesitated, then stepped aside. "Look, you can come in for a minute and use my phone if you want. It's late out." I hesitated. My instincts told me to be careful, but kindness showed itself in many unexpected ways. "Thank you," I said softly, stepping inside. The house was neat and smelled faintly of coffee. He handed me a cordless phone, and I dialed the last number I had for Linda. To my surprise, it rang. "Hello," a familiar voice answered. Tears sprang to my eyes. "Linda." "It's me, Maggie." There was a pause, then a gasp. "Maggie. Oh my goodness, where are you? I've been waiting all evening." I quickly explained the confusion, how I'd gone to the wrong house. Linda chuckled through the phone, her voice warm and full of life. "Oh Maggie, you're at 1427 Drive. My house is 1427 Avenue. They're on opposite sides of town." My knees nearly gave way. So close yet so far. Chapter 6. The man, whose name was Mr. Harris, shook his head with a small smile when he overheard. "That'll do it. These streets can confuse anybody." He offered to call me another cab, and while we waited, he poured me a cup of coffee. As we sat, he told me about his late wife, how they had raised 2 daughters in that very house. There was a sadness in his eyes, but also a gentleness. Sometimes strangers carry pieces of stories that mirror our own. I spoke about my late husband, about the loneliness that creeps in when the nights get too long. For a brief moment, it felt like 2 souls, once strangers, had found comfort in shared grief. The cab finally arrived, and I thanked Mr. Harris deeply for his kindness. "It's not every day a man opens his door to a stranger at night," I told him. He shrugged softly. "My wife would have wanted me to help." The ride to Linda's house was longer than I expected, weaving through streets that seemed to stretch forever. My heart was light again, though, because I knew this time I was heading in the right direction. When the cab pulled up, there it was, 1427 South Maplewood Avenue. A cheerful yellow house with flowers blooming along the walkway, and the porch light glowing like a beacon of welcome. I stepped out, my suitcase in hand, and before I even knocked, the door swung open. "Maggie!" Linda cried, rushing toward me with arms wide open. We hugged tightly, laughing and crying all at once. 30 years melted away in that single embrace. But just as we stepped inside, another surprise was waiting. Sitting in Linda's living room was a man in a wheelchair, her brother Thomas. His eyes lit up when he saw me. "So you're the famous Maggie," he said. "Linda's been talking about you all day." Little did I know, Thomas would play a role in this visit that I never expected. Over the next few days, Linda and I caught up like no time had passed. We laughed about old classmates, shared stories of children and grandchildren, and stayed up late into the night with cups of tea. It was everything I had dreamed of, and more. But I couldn't ignore Thomas. He was gentle, witty, and kind, but there was something in his eyes, a quiet struggle he was hiding. One afternoon, when Linda had stepped out to buy groceries, he spoke. "You know, Maggie, it hasn't been easy since my accident," he said quietly. "I was a carpenter all my life, and now, well, I feel like a burden sometimes." His words broke my heart. I reached over, placing my wrinkled hand over his. "Thomas, you are not a burden. You are a blessing. You have wisdom, kindness, and a story worth sharing. That's more valuable than any hammer or nail." Tears welled in his eyes. "You sound like my mama." That moment reminded me of something powerful. Kindness is not just about helping strangers. It's about reminding those close to us of their worth, especially when they forget. But our peaceful talk was cut short when Linda came back inside, her face pale. "Maggie." "Thomas, we need to lock the doors. Something's happening down the street." We rushed to the window. Blue and red lights flashed again, sirens wailing. Neighbors were standing outside, pointing. A robbery had taken place at the corner store just 2 blocks away. Fear gripped the air like a heavy blanket. The 3 of us sat together in the living room, the blinds drawn, listening to the chaos outside. My heart pounded just as it had the night I first got lost. But this time I wasn't alone. Linda held my hand, Thomas whispered a prayer, and together we found strength in unity. After what felt like hours, the sirens faded. Linda turned on the news, and we learned the police had caught the suspects. Relief flooded the room. That night, as we sat around the kitchen table, we promised each other something. Life is fragile, Linda said softly. We don't know what tomorrow holds. But what we can do is make sure we never let 30 years pass between us again. I nodded, wiping my tears. Amen to that. Friends are God's way of reminding us we're never truly alone. We laughed, we cried, and we planned visits. Not just phone calls or letters, but real visits. I thought about Angela, Mr. Howard, Officer Daniels, Mr. Harris, and even Thomas. Each person had been a patch in the quilt of this journey, teaching me something about kindness, resilience, and hope. When I finally laid my head down that night in Linda's guest room, I felt peace like I hadn't felt in years. My trip to Tampa had been filled with fear, confusion, and danger, but also with love, kindness, and the rediscovery of friendship. And so, dear listener, that is how my journey ended. Not with being lost, but with being found in more ways than one.